Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English, and today we are speaking to the president of the Astrological Association of Great Britain, and this gentleman is called Roy Gillett, who is an Aquarius. So tell me, Roy, thank you very much for joining me today.
Hello. Hello.
What was it, and how did you hear about the Astrological Association at the moment? So how did you A, get into astrology to start with, and then B, get to hear about the AA? Talk me through it.
Yeah, well, there's a big gap between the two. I mean, I think like so many people, I got involved in astrology at a major point of crisis in my life where there's a lot of changes happen. And in fact, looking back, I'd just gone through a 5-year period of Uranus, Saturn on my midheaven and Neptune rising on my ascendant, and many other sorts of challenging experiences around the Saturn return. And it was by accident that I came across someone who introduced me to astrology. I mean, I was a very skeptical person at the time. And just in a few moments, they touched on issues that I'd never been able to talk to anybody about before. You know, it was just amazingly changeable. And I thought, well, I've got to find out about this. And I started studying the subject and started calculating charts using Julia Parker and Derek Parker's Complete Astrologer, as it was called in those days. And, you know, I did my own chart. I did the charts of other people. And one day someone asked me, well, what does it mean? You calculated my chart. What does that mean? It's not mean this to me. And I thought, well, I'm only just learning. I don't know what it means, but I just, yeah. But he said, no, try, tell me. And so I had the text, you know, the checkbook, and I started talking the checkbooks, you know, what some Sun in Venus and all those things mean in the sign and everything. And he started talking to me as if I knew him as well as I felt I'd been known ages earlier. Then I realised I had 4 planets in Aquarius and the moon in Gemini with Sag rising. So I was a teacher, and obviously I was also an astrologer, and it all went on from there. Over the next couple of years, I moved on from school teaching to becoming a full-time astrologer.
Oh, right. What sort of teaching were you doing before you got into astrology then?
I was an English teacher and a housemaster in a large comprehensive school in England.
Oh, okay. So you'll have good knowledge then. So if you've got to do English teaching, you can have good knowledge of English literature and all that.
Yeah, I studied English literature. I studied the Greek tragedies. And also taught Shakespeare to A-level, things like that. You know, I had quite a responsible job. I had about 240 teenagers in my house who I had to look after, these pastoral care of. And that was a part of the crisis. You knew, when you knew astrology, you had a tool that would understand them far better than most of the psychology you'd learnt at college. Yeah. And that was a tremendous crisis. I had to choose between teaching and astrology. And I chose astrology in 1976.
Oh, so how did it come down to a choice then? Were you going to get booted out of the school you were at? What was
Well, no, what I'm going to devote my life to, a kind of Gemini moon, schizophrenic struggle between trying to do it the conventional way and trying to do it the way I understood, or focus on what I understood to be more beneficial in understanding people. And I chose the latter.
Oh, okay. Well, astrology does allow you to do that, though, doesn't it? You can learn. I mean, you've only got to glance at. I mean, you just quickly asked me a couple of questions about my chart, and then boom, you've already calculated that in your mind what that means. Yeah. And I've already glanced at your chart, so I sort of know. And then that's a funny thing, isn't it? When an astrologer looks at another astrologer's chart, it's like, ooh, you know, you sort of know. So, and I think it's quite revealing sometimes when you do someone's chart, they know nothing about astrology. You've looked at their chart like you know 95% about them.
They think you know them, and as long as you keep to the astrology and don't let your ego get in the way in a consultation situation, don't lay your stuff on them, but just keep to the discipline of astrology, you will always know them in a responsible way, you know. And this is the beauty of astrology. I mean, getting back to the school classroom, there was this one boy who was terrible. He was always causing trouble and getting involved in fights and all the rest of it. And I thought, looking at it simplistically, oh, this guy must be strong Leo, Aries, all that sort of stuff. Looking at it that way, when I looked, I didn't know his time of birth, but I knew his date of birth from the register. Looked it up. It's incredibly powerful Cancer. And what I found out was that he was a totally vulnerable, victimized boy who was desperately trying to survive in an emotionally traumatic world, and particularly to do with his home background and everything. And once I knew that, I knew how to deal with him. Whereas when I'm trying to deal with a battle with someone who's causing trouble and all the rest of it, So, I mean, that was a turning point, really. I thought, well, look, I've got this knowledge and I'm not going to be able to use it. I have to focus my life on using it and making more people aware that it's valuable.
Amazing. Yeah. And then how did you get to hear it? So there you are, somebody's read your chart and you've started investigating your own and reading Julie Parker
stuff. I learned a bit about it, yeah.
And then how did you find out about the Astrological Association? Was this person a member, or?
We've got to be very careful here because this is quite a long story, but I'll be very brief. I didn't learn about the Astrological Association in 1976. Right. In fact, I've been very interested to have done so. But in fact, what I did a 2-year, I married my present wife and she was a New Zealander. So we had this crazy idea of traveling overland to New Zealand, which we proceeded to spend the next 2 years or so doing. And I'll spend a lot of time in India and Southeast Asia and also Australia, getting very involved in Tibetan Buddhism, arriving in New Zealand, deciding to open what we called the Astrological Advice Bureau in a small market town in New Zealand, where they'd never had an astrologer before, as far as I know, and becoming very successful there, organising conferences in New Zealand. And going through a whole series of other things, a long biography. But I discovered in 1981, on returning to England on a family visit, that Julia Parker was in fact my cousin by marriage. See her, and that was the first time I heard about the Astrological Association and the Faculty of Astrological Studies. Returned to New Zealand, finally coming back to England in 1985, where, having been an organizer of astrology in New Zealand for about 6 years, I made links with the English community and particularly Charles Harvey, and spent time with Charles. And that's how I learnt about the Astrological Association.
Got it. So that was a bit later on then in your astrological development. It was
86, so I learnt about it. In 1990, I was invited to join the Council of the Astrological Association, and I've been a member of that ever since, becoming the chair in 1994 and the president in 1999.
So that's been part of your later astrological developments. It's not the initial. So the initial one is were you teaching yourself? Did you go to any classes? So you mentioned that you went to
amazing thing, because of the way it went. I just had this book which I learnt from, and because I was doing a lot of practice. I mean, I do have a lot of natural astrological talent because of my chart. I've got the Mercury is early Aquarius, Jupiter middle Aquarius, Sun, Venus conjunct trine Moon in Aquarius. It's a very powerful, and also the Sag rising with the North Node conjunct the ascendant. I'm saying it quickly. Those who are a bit new to astrology, don't be overwhelmed. Just listen to it a couple of times and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Because of all that, I was able to learn it quite well. And the traveling, what I actually did in the journey across the world is we went right the way down to the south of Sudan and then back up again to India and right across and then down through Australia and right the way round Australia virtually, well, from Perth to Melbourne before we flew out. We didn't do the last bit. And so we got to learn the nature of the heavens. We got to look at the heavens. And I kept a diary every day. Every 3 months I wrote the transits for the future in this diary. And then each day I noted it and wrote a comment on what happened that day. So I studied. It was a living experience of learning astrology. Wow. When I got to New Zealand and opened the Astrological Advice Bureau, I had started being given books all over the place, and I started reading the books and realised that I had learned nearly all that was in the books by travelling, not by reading books.
Oh, how funny. Well, that's just actually ascendant, surely, the whole travelling thing, no?
Yeah, it works. It works. So, I mean, that doesn't mean I haven't studied many books and studied many astrologers since and learned a lot from them. It isn't I knew everything, but I had the basic understanding of astrology by travelling the world and using astrology every day and keeping the notes of what was going on, doing what I should have done and doing what I shouldn't have done. See? have done what happened, you know.
Yeah, but that's why you're into mundane. See, I can't do mundane astrology. I'm rubbish at it. I'm a consulting astrologer, and I just
Mm,
work one-on-one with clients. So sort of like a counselling type of
yeah,
session. That's the
yeah,
astrology that I practice.
yeah,
And I can't do. And you write in the journal every issue. You know, you write about the mundane, because the mundane, just to explain, just means
mm,
the astrology that relates to everyday happenings, as opposed
yeah.
to
What
personal.
happens in the world, the politics, the social changes, political decisions, and wars, and etc. Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I was all those early days in New Zealand. I was essentially a consulting astrologer. I saw, well, I mean, several thousand people, I think, in New Zealand over the years, and that was my main work, personal. What do you do? But also, I did bring out this 3 monthly diary
Mhm.
of which was a kind of development from what I'd done personally, but I now published it. So people would see a little comment for each day of the year of the month, and every 3 months it came out, and then it came out every year. And so I was gradually building up an understanding of the world as it was from my understanding of the individual people I was seeing in the consultation room, and seeing the world behave, you know, and almost came to the point, because of my Aquarian energy, of feeling I'm doing the chart when I do the working with the planets in the Astrological Journal every 2 months. It's almost like I'm doing the chart for the world. I'm advising the world like I would advise a client. It's quite an arrogant sort of thing to say, but you know, it's just a little contribution, really. I'm not claiming to be the great know-all, but the point, well, Aquarians do tend to be like that. But you know, I felt I wanted to somehow be a person who took on the karmic challenge of the world, and used astrology to have insight. You know, because what astrology does, of course, it makes you very objective.
Yes,
It gets you out of your own ego and
yes.
into the neutrality of the needs of everything around you, rather than your own personal demands.
Well, it
Uh,
disassociates, because what if I don't have clients personally one-on-one in the office anymore, because
yeah,
we've got a flipping pandemic, so
yeah,
we're doing it
yeah,
online. But if I do have them in front of the laptop and I'm showing them a pretty
mm,
picture of this and that and the other, we're then talking about the image, the
yeah,
chart. We're not talking about them personally. So then they'll tell me, and I'll say, oh, you know, what was going on for you in 99? Oh, 99, that was the year that I don't know, my house was robbed and my car
yeah, yeah,
exploded or
yeah,
something. You know, what was going on in 99, because there's some sort of Pluto thing going past, whatever.
mm,
And then you can demonstrate that in the chart. And then people don't, it's funny enough, because people don't say, well, how did you know that? But you know, as an
mm,
astrologer, that
mm,
at that moment in time, there might have been something going
mm,
on for them. But because they're looking at the chart, most of my clients won't know anything about
mm,
astrology, but they'll look
mm,
at the chart and they'll go, oh, that's interesting. And then they're talking about the chart. So they're not so much, it's not so much coming from them. We're now, oh, this is your problem where you are now, these
mm,
are the transits now,
mm,
this is because you've got some sort of weird aspect between your
mm,
sun and your moon and they're square or whatever,
mm,
which is what I've got. Never mind.
mm,
You know, what can we do about this? How can we make this better, type
yeah,
of thing? Because
yeah,
it's true though, when you do plot the planets an awful lot, which you can
mm,
definitely do when you first start learning astrology,
yeah,
then you can see the correlation. I do know people, when they first start listening to the podcast, the first 20 episodes teach them basic. They'll ping me over an email and they'll go, oh, you know, what chart shape am I? And they'll tell
mm,
me stuff. And they're so excited right at the beginning to learn astrology, because it
yeah,
opens up these doors to
mm,
this world that you just didn't know exists, but now it just makes so much
mm.
sense.
Well, the trouble is that we're brought up in a world where the social background we find ourselves in lays all sorts of trips on you.
Mm.
Um, and you have to behave in particular ways, or you have to have particular attitudes. And it doesn't really think about you. It's thinking about society and the assumptions of the society you're born into. And even if you're a rebel, you're going to be a rebel in terms of the society you choose to be a rebel in.
Yeah.
There is no objectivity, but and therefore the individual is struggling with what's expected of them.
Hmm.
All right, the individual. I'll say that again. The individual is expected. If you look at your chart, you see what your potential is and what
Yeah.
your needs are.
Yeah.
Now you have to relate that to what's expected of you. That's when you start growing up and living a mature life. And this is what the consultation process is for me. And
Mm.
of course, now let's go to mundane astrology. That's what the world has to learn. And by God, are we going through it at the moment? An incredible karmic awakening that's happening in the world at the moment. And astrology can really help you, because the predictions of astrologers about the whole of the period, what Pluto's been in Capricorn since 2008, and particularly this year, 2020, have been absolutely bang on. We've known this was coming in some way or other. Not everybody would have said it was a pandemic, but we knew the world was going to go through a massive economic crisis and challenge in 2020. And I've been lecturing on this for about 15 or more years, talking about it coming, and so this is the year that astrology is vindicated in many ways. And if only the world would use it, we'd be much wiser in anticipating the future, and there'd be far less suffering in the world, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, that is a Buddhist theme, though, isn't it? The end of suffering. You've studied Buddhism as well,
Yeah.
but suffering is actually probably only in our minds, maybe not so much in
Absolutely.
reality.
Yeah. It is in our minds, but it's because we become attached to the cycles that are happening, which suddenly shock us from our familiar environment and our expectations, and then we start thrashing out of blaming people right, left and centre, or societies or systems, instead of realising that it's because we're not dealing appropriately with the world as it is. We're creating suffering for our people for it, and that is the basic problem.
And it's a tricky thing, but my belief is that astrology at the moment, with the present transits, Neptune being in Pisces and Uranus being in Taurus, I mean, I'm more concerned about those two planets because they happened to have appeared when we had the plague, and the plague went on for quite a while, and Uranus will be in Taurus for quite a while as well. So I don't know much about mundane astrology, but I have checked different dates and blah blah blah. But we were. Pardon?
Carry on. Yes, you're right. Carry on.
Yeah. But I mean, we're not going to be going into great detail about the pandemic in this interview because
we are getting a little bit into talking generally about astrology, whereas you've really got me here to talk about the Astrological Association.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We've come to the door of the Astrological Association and involved ourselves in a conversation, which is what the Astrological Association is about: is understanding astrology and respecting in all its facets.
Yes.
Both as a way of serving the human predicament and a way of serving the social predicament, and all the various methods that very intelligent people, largely most astrologers, are way ahead in intelligence, I think, in society, and also encourage that they're willing to use their mind objectively rather than just fit into a pattern. I mean, there are some people who are a little bit easily deluded into believing dodgy things, but in all societies that's true. But generally, the atmosphere of astrology is one of informed, intelligent, uncompromising insight into what lies behind what's going on in the world. And the Astrological Association was founded in 1959 to make that knowledge available more widely. It was inspired by, particularly by a man called John Addy, who very soon was joined by a man called Charles Harvey. And together as president and general secretary, and then Charles became president when John died, they, for over 30, 40 years, made the Astrological Association a major conduit where all the various ways of astrology could be exchanged and understood in a journal, and also in the annual conference. And the annual conference of the Astrological Association, we're now, I think, coming up to our 62nd continuous uninterrupted astrological conference next year, is the place where astrologers meet in the UK every year and exchange a wide range of possible ways of doing astrology.
That is most wonderful, because I came to the one last year, and it's just the fact that you've got so many astrologers all under one roof. It is a wonderful thing, and like you said, there's all different varieties of astrology as well. There's nobody like this version or my house system or whatever is the best, and everybody's exploring different facets of it, which is amazing. And that's why I wanted to be able to share with the podcast listeners and obviously YouTube channel viewers that the Astrological Association is a jolly good organisation to join. Now, it doesn't matter where you live either, does it? You can live in another country and be a member.
Well, what my role as president for the last 20 years, where I've taken over from what Charles Harvey and John Addy established, and the conferences ongoing, and all the journals. We published a journal every 3 months initially, and now every 2 months, continually since 1959. So all the knowledge in that, written by many astrologers no longer with us, incredible expert, high level of scholarship, nearly all the articles are. All that is now being converted to an MP3 system, so that everyone is available as an MP3. The talks at conference, they didn't get recording them until 1983, I think it was, but in 1983 onwards, all the talks pretty well, just a couple not missing, but nearly all of the talks that were given at conference since 1983 available as MP4, no, MP3s, aren't they? What is that? The PDF. Sorry, I'm getting I'm losing my my technical stuff. The journals, of course, are PDFs.
PDFs, yeah.
And the recordings of MP3s, and we have some MP4s as well for some of the videos, but that's later on. But basically, all that information, if you go to the Astrological Association website, which is www. Or HTTPS, if you like, nowadays, //astrologicalassociation.com. That's all you have to really type in the search engine, Astrological Association, all one long word, .com. If you go there, you will find our website, which has just been updated to a very high standard, multi-platform, accessible. There you can join the Astrological Association for just £37. That will give you access to every journal that's ever been published, the PDF of every one for you to download and look at. And you can also, at a very reasonable price, purchase recordings of all the conference talks or any of the conference talks, as well as getting lots of generics about our local network, which is growing and expanding, about our library, and about some
2 libraries.
Second-hand books. Pardon?
No, there's 2 libraries now, because Philip runs one in Wales.
Yeah, we've got the archive in South Wales, which is a whole range of books from about the whole house full of almost of books from all over the world, and then the main sort of cream of the library, which is still in the border between Devon and Cornwall. Unfortunately, you can't visit any of these places, but people are donating books to us, and the books that we have already got several copies of, we are making them available at very reasonable prices. So if you go online, you're looking for astrology books, it might be a good idea to go to the Astrological Association library area, and you'll see a link to all the books we've got for sale, and pre-loved books, which are really good. So what we're doing, the idea of this website is to make the knowledge of 60 or more years available to the whole world. And by the way, it's 52 conferences and 62 years. I got that slightly wrong earlier on, but there we go.
But it is a marvelous. I've been a member all the time. I've been even above, and I've been here 20 plus years, 25 years, and it's been great, because I mean, if nothing else, the journal, if you don't go to any conferences or whatever because you can't, and that was the thing that I thought was really good during the beginning of the pandemic. Everything went online, and everybody successfully managed to convert sort of conferences and talks and stuff to an online format, which had to do it at very short notice. Brilliantly done.
An amazing job was done by an American astrologer who organises a conference in the West Coast, who pioneered a multi-track Zoom conference. And Wendy, and a brilliant programmer who's associated with Wendy Stacey, our chair of the AA, took some guidance from this lady, Laura, but also did a tremendous job herself with her programmer, and with Chris Mitchell, who is a brilliant data processor. Yeah, he's great. He's a professional data processor. We couldn't have done
works for the NHS.
And he does. And so those three together created a multi-channel, virtually a virtual conference, which was as close as you could get it to a real conference. We even had a coffee room after hours, where people could come and chat to each other, And so, yes, it was a tremendous success. And it did mean that many people who couldn't get to conference for one reason or another were able to get there. So
that was
you
the thing.
know,
People that are
it's really good.
disabled that might not have been able to get there by going by vehicle or public transport or whatever. That was the thing that there was some feedback on that, and I think that makes it much more accessible. And the thing with astrology as well, though, that there's a sort of a groundswell of more interest in it, which I think is amazing, because since I started my podcast, which is 2017, the amount of people that listen to it now has just shot through the roof, which is lovely. And because people want to learn about it, because now it's easier to learn it. You can, I mean, back in the day when you did a chart, that'd be a piece of paper and an ephemeris and a calculator, and it'd take a while. My auntie was interested in astrology, and I've got her ephemeris. I didn't chat astrology with her when she was alive, but my sisters did. But there's no way I could have made a chart back in the day and had to do the maths. I just would have given up. So I've got a computer program that's Windows 1990 it runs on, and it's a rather old program, but that's how I learned astrology, with that particular computer program. And I know you do solar fire, is that right?
Yeah. No, I mean, my go back all the way through. I mean, I did start off doing mechanical calculations, including interpolation between different times of day and all the rest of it, doing all that manually. And I remember the first time I ever went, it was about 1981, 82, 81, 82. 1981. I went to a woman in America we were visiting, and she had this tape recorder which she plugged into a system, and this loaded a program which very slowly gave you the position of the sun, the position of the moon, the position of the ascendant, just like that, just very, very, very slowly came up on the screen. And that was the early thing. Since then, I've been working with Astrolabe, which is Robert Hand, Gary Christen, Marilyn Holliston, and we work in Cape Cod, and we've developed with the Australians who initiated it in Melbourne, and first of all initially in Adelaide. We've developed Solar Fire, which is the #1 program in the world at the moment. It does unbelievable things, like you could, in the time that I'm now going to start from now until I finish these couple of sentences, you could have calculated a person's natal chart, clicked a button and looked at their natal progress and transiting chart now. And I could now have all the information I need to talk about your present situation, all the technical background, or you tell me a date, I just put that date in, and now I have all the information what was going on that day.
Wow.
And the program, and it does many other things. It tells you where to go in the world, or what it would be like if you went there, and so on. It's just an amazing development in computer technology that's occurred since 1981 and now. That's 40 years. And it's like everywhere in the world. But it's so important for us, whereas in the past you had to do this arduous calculation on a piece of paper. Now you can instantly get information. I can tell you anything that's going on any time for a 10,000 year period, from 499 BCE to 499 CE, and like day by day, everything. It's just unbelievable how quickly you can calculate this. It's liberated us and given astrology a chance to really stand up in the world alongside any other scientific system and say that, we know what's going on in terms of our criteria of judgment, and we can calculate it really precisely. It's only a question now of the world at large beginning to recognise the value there could be to the world at large if it used this system. And the association is there to facilitate an intelligent understanding of all what I've said.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that made me want to join after I think I'd met Chris and he told me about it, it didn't seem a vast amount of money. I'm also an alternative therapist, and to join one of the first organisations I was a member of, that was £390 a year. It's like, wow. And then I'm a member of another professional organisation that's only 40 something pounds a year, but anything that's less than 50 quid, you think, well, it's an awful, not awful, whether it's very good value, and I've made some fantastic friends. That's the thing about it, that's going to activate your Aquarius planet. It's like friendship is so important for Aquarius, but that's the thing, the astrological friends that you make, and their understanding of astrology. It gives a totally different language. Now, it is tricky when you first start learning astrology to go to. I remember going to a Liz Green conference in friend who knows not much about astrology, and I sat there and it was like he was speaking a different language, and I was like, what do you mean by that, what do you mean by the other? And she asked a member of the audience to come up with a chart and stuff, and she talked about that. And but it is a totally different language, but it doesn't take long to learn it. I was quite surprised, and I'm still quite surprised how right at the very beginning it's just like, oh, it's a blur, I can't understand it. But only after reading a bit and studying a bit, then it starts to come through, and it does make sense. And I absolutely, well, I live and breathe it. It's what I do all day, every day. But I found it very helpful for clients as well. I mean, there was a lady I was reading for yesterday, knew nothing about astrology. It didn't matter. I could still answer those questions for her. And so in the time that you've been president, so being a member, how much has astrology itself changed in all that time? Would you say it stays the same or moved?
No, well, you heard what I just said, my previous statement, that the big jump in the calculation range is enormous. So now we can virtually say anything about anything and know that we've got our calculations right. I mean, all the computer software is based on Jet Propulsion Lab calculations, the very latest calculations that are used for sending spacecraft around the universe, so we're very accurate. That's the one change. Another change is, of course, the development of scholarship. The Faculty of Astrological Studies was founded in 1948. Other schools around the world, some in America and that, but there is a tremendous blossoming of people formally studying astrology in the years that I've been working with the association. And of course, in the 1990s, Nick Campion and I, Nick was then president and I was chair, we were working together, and Nick was doing a PhD. Out of that blossomed the possibility of him actually teaching an MA course at Bath Spa and then the University of South Wales, St David's. And he's been doing that MA for about 20 years now. Yes. And so you can get a master in cosmology, which is about astronomy and astrology and culture. Yes. And, I mean, all right, generally the universities don't accept that the formal study of astrology is a valid subject, but they can't deny that the attitude towards the cosmos has had a major cultural influence throughout all time, and therefore we have to study how various people study astrology, including the subgroup community of astrologers in the modern time, and therefore you have to include astrology in that context. That's how Nick has arranged it. And so there's another standard. So you have a lot of people who've got a master's degrees, and some of those people, such as Bernadette Brady and many others, Liz Green even, went on to take to a PhD study using the master's qualification as the foundation.
So I think Chris has just done that, hasn't he?
Chris has got it. He's got the MA. He hasn't done his PhD yet, I don't think. Has he?
I think he has. Yeah, he did, because he did it about that. It was about the astrologer that was teaching at the university. I can't remember what it was, but we just had that in the last interview I did with him, because he was talking about his PhD.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. He did. And so there's been a lot of people who got PhDs out of that development that all emanated from, in a way, the association, but particularly Nick Campion's incredible hard work. I mean, Nick Campion, one of the great figures of our community. His history of Western astrology is a divine. There's not a better book or academic book, I don't think, on any subject. It's so well researched. However,
it's wonderful. I've got copies of that. There's two in that. I've got the first one and the second one. I've recommended that a lot, and I've met him because because I live in Bath, and they used to run the course from Bath Spa University. My sister's a lecturer there, or she's actually higher up than a lecturer now, but I went to an open day that they got there, and they eventually had to move to Wales, but that particular day, because they live in Bath, I trundled down there on my bike and had a nice day out. But these are people, so listeners might not know, but Nick Campion is a member of the Astrological Association.
Nick became president when Charles Harvey retired in 1994, and I became chair. And then in 1999, Nick retired in order to do this this academic work that I've just described, and I became president. So I've been working very closely with Nick all the time, particularly in those late 1990s where we were on the phone every day virtually, rather like Charles and John were. And I just mentioned him. But but you're talking about the development of astrology in the period of the that I've been connected with the AA.
Yes.
This is really important. Also, the international connections as well. We spend a lot of time linking in. There's been a lot of development of astrology in the ex-Soviet Union after 1990. There's been a considerable amount of development of astrology in Turkey as well. Western astrology in Turkey. It's very sort of strong schools in that country, and also in China, in mainland China. There's a lot of interest in astrology there, and also, of course, we have these interactions with the American astrologers and so on. And I've been particularly connected with the French community of astrologers, and particularly a man called André Babu, who died last year at the age of 98 on his 98th birthday, who wrote extensively on astrology for 80 years, from when he was 17 years old, and who made major forecasts on mundane astrology of the key turning points in European history: the death of Stalin, the end of the Soviet Union, the 2008-10 financial crisis, and of course this year's pandemic. He, in a very systematic way, using astrology in a very systematic way. His Planetary Cycles book, which I edited the English translation from the French, is a very good description of systematic mundane astrology, which
does he describe in there how to do mundane astrology? Is that
he does it by example. I mean, what he basically does is takes the outer planets. I mean, there's many ways of doing mundane astrology, but his method for this particular work was to take the outer planets from Jupiter through to Pluto, to look at all the possible aspect connections between them, like the 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 120, and the reverse going back the other way, and conjunctions, and then relate that to world events on particular subjects. Like particularly he's writing about his period in his life, so the Vietnam War, the Algerian War, things like that, and the Paris peace conferences, and when major things happened, and so on and so forth. So he shows how the similar aspects have similar or complementary effects all the way through the system. It's not cherry picking, like some people go along and say, oh, such and such happened on such and such a day, isn't that amazing astrology works? Well, if you're only just picking one day and one event, it's not much help. What he did, he picked every day and every event and made it show you how it could work. And so he I got quite close to Andre on a few occasions, traveling to France to meet him, and also organising the translation of the book and publishing it and everything. And I really learned how to use the mundane astrology from that, and really showing how beneficial it could be. You know, if there's a peace conference, for example, but there's a major negative aspect coming a bit later, you can almost be certain that if you're not very careful, everything you've achieved now is going to go wrong then. And therefore you anticipate you ride into the organisation, not over realistic expectation. I could talk a lot about the modern situation, the present situation politically, and sort of show how by understanding the astrology you can see where that's going to do, and if we handle it this way it go well, and if we handle it that way it go badly. Just like if someone is facing up to a Saturn, let's get down to personal stuff now. If someone is going through a Saturn transit through their 7th house, and they come and see you as an astrologer and said, I've been living with this man as his wife for 10 years and I'm so bored and fed up, and I've just he's really lovely. I really, it's so great to be with him. I feel like a young girl again. What should I do? When should I get the divorce and get married to the other person? And you look at their chart and you say, well, Saturn's a fairly slow moving planet. You're got a pretty large 7th house. It's probably going to be going through the 7th house the next 2 or 3 years. If you leave your husband and go with this young man, all the problems that you would have had with your husband, you will have with this young man. Now, who do you want to go through problems with? Your husband or this young man?
Yeah.
Now, that's an intelligent astrological conversation, isn't it?
Yes.
And it might avert a major catastrophe for her children, who she has with her first husband, as well as for herself and her future. And the same is true of the world. So it's very useful to have that astrological understanding.
And wouldn't it be nice if more organisations actually did have astrologers working for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know. It's well, you know, the most sensational example of astrologers working for the world is Ronald Reagan. Have you heard that story?
I think his missus had an astrologer, didn't she?
Yeah, it's a woman called Joan Quigley, who was really, she related more to Ronald Reagan's wife. But there's this book she wrote called Joan Quigley called What Does Joan Say? Which is Ronald Reagan speaking to his wife, Nancy. And when he was negotiating with Gorbachev, the peace, the nuclear disarmament accords and the general rapprochement between Russia and America, which happened under Reagan's reign, which is unbelievable, because those of you who are old enough remember that when Reagan came to the presidency in 1980-81, everybody thought the World War was going to happen because he wanted Star Wars. He was going to obliterate the Russians. You know, he was a very macho guy. But before the end of his presidency, he had very fortunate that Piscean Gorbachev was in charge of the Soviet Union at the time. But, you know, he had managed to come to a rapprochement with Gorbachev and sign a number of peace treaties. And that was all guided, the timing of those peace treaties was based on astrological understanding, what Joan said.
Wow. So she advised him on those particular things?
But through Nancy.
But yeah, via Nancy, because it was
one
Nancy.
One chief of staff who found out this was going on resigned in protest, but he still did it, you know. You know, this is one of the most sensational examples of astrology's benefit in the world. For a while, it was listened to. And we actually made peace with the Soviet Union. You think of the hysteria of all the nuclear periods since World War II. That was for a while eased by these two men. It wasn't just astrology, but by astrology helping these two men come to an agreement with each other.
Fantastic. Wow. But it is useful though, isn't it? And I think you can reach a stage which actually happened to me when I first started studying that. I was looking at everything every day. What's happening with the planets today. And I early on in the beginning, I had a car accident and I mashed my car, and the police came to take a statement from me because it wasn't my vehicle, it was somebody else's, but I had permission to drive it. Anyway, police turned up at the door and he said, well, what do you do for a living? I said, oh, I'm an astrologer and stuff. And he said, well, didn't you check the planets for today? Don't be funny. No, I hadn't bloody checked them for today. I know. I got out of doing that.
Yeah, I know.
On.
Yeah, well, it's not just the planets, it's how you are. I mean, just advice for your listeners, actually. We've talked a lot of heavy stuff here, but basically a very simple tip. If you're learning astrology, and it's very easy once you've got your birth chart and you've managed to get that, and of course you can get that printed out on a number of free channels. If you want to get started, there's a couple of links. I don't know if you want to give them in a little while, but where you can get charts printed. You've probably done that already, but once you've got your chart, if you then just follow the moon around the chart every month, see how it changes house, and then it clicks on particular planets on your chart, and observe what happens in your life. I remember when I was first getting into astrology, I started doing this, and I noticed that when I've got a packed third house of Aquarian planets and an empty Capricorn house second, whenever the moon was going through Capricorn, I was on my own, twiddling my thumbs, not knowing what to do. And in those days, I was quite a young man, so I was in quite a romantic situation. So, when it moved into Aquarius, my girlfriend would turn up, but so was 7 other people coming to visit me the same day, you know. And the moon was packing me out with the third house social activities, you know. And so people do that, you know, follow the moon around your chart. And once you've done that for a few months, because it's every month you can do this. Then follow the sun, the Mercury and Venus around your chart, and you'll begin to understand how astrology is affecting you. And then, of course, the outer planets in the bigger spreads of your life. So it's a very useful thing to be able to do.
That's a useful tip. Yeah. I haven't I've done a YouTube video on the movement of the moon just to demonstrate how it does change sign. But I must say I haven't. What I have been tracking though, so I mustn't point with a pencil. I've been tracking because I'm sun sign Pisces, and I've got Sun and Mercury in Pisces, and Neptune's now in my ruling sign. That I've been journaling about that since it happened, because just to see what it would do. But anyway, that it is a useful exercise to observe your own chart, especially like the moons. That's an easy thing to do, and especially
every
with it
month
going through
you
the
see
houses.
you can recognise the repetitions very quickly, and once you've learnt that from the moon, then it's great for the year. And then of course once you've learned it for the year, Jupiter's coming up to your second house. This is every 12 years. Oh dear, what happened when the moon goes through the 12th house, the second house? You can start extrapolating that, from the moon experience into a possible Jupiter experience. This is really helpful.
It is, and astrology is amazingly helpful. I think it's the most amazingly helpful thing, because if nothing else, and I think people find this when they first get into astrology, you learn so much about yourself, or the dynamic in a family. I'm forever talking about people, why don't you get along with your mother or your father or your sister or whatever? Have you checked their charts out? And it might be a case of projection, like you think your mother is this, that, and that. Now you look at her chart and we'll chat about her chart. She's probably not the awful person that you thought she was. And I found that out with my Aquarius mother that I didn't get along with, when eventually we found her birth time in the family Bible that had been lent to a cousin. It was returned back to us. So we found her birth time, found out she got Gemini ascendant, moon in Gemini in the 12th, sun sign Aquarius in the 9th, had travelled a lot, lived in Hong Kong. And I could never understand why I didn't get on with her until I realised that I got sun and moon square. And it was at that moment, that finding out my mother's chart, the dynamic that I thought, I wasn't compatible with her, and we didn't get along, and all the rest of it was just rubbish. That was just me projecting onto what I thought the mother should be like.
Well, your mother would find it difficult to understand your emotional energy. In any case, there's a big problem between Aquarians and Pisceans in that the Aquarians know everything, and the Pisceans feel everything. And there is no way that an Aquarian can put it right by talking about it, but they don't realize that until they understand astrology, and then they do know how to hang in there and feel with a Piscean.
Yes, and I've got two sisters that are also Aquarius that have an astrological knowledge, so it's all been repaired. I mean, there's no issue in the family now, because the use of astrology has helped that understanding. And so just for the last few minutes, just as we return back to the Astrological Association, so what are the plans for the future for the AA? Where do you see it going? What's going on?
This is where I hope that people listening who felt some sort of importance of what we've been just talking about will be a part of this. We have this wonderful new website, which just go to it, please, astrologicalassociation.com, and just immerse yourself in it, whether you can use a mobile phone or tablet or your computer. Maybe join. As we said, it's £37 to get all the online information. It's wonderful to actually own the actual hard copy of the journal. If you want that, it costs another £12 a year, but you get 6 of them, so that's very cheap. A little bit more if you're international. I think it's an extra £10 a year, because we've got a special dispensation for posting it internationally. But so it's not that expensive to get the journal, and obviously we have plans. We're crossing our fingers about this one. We have booked a date for the Halloween weekend next year for an actual physical on-site conference. This will also be an online conference, so we will do it online and on site. We hope we'll be able to do it on site. I mean, the way things are going on at the moment, it's a little bit on the edge. They're talking about possibly most people being vaccinated, or at least the system getting a little bit better by then. Nobody's talking about the autumn next year yet. They're talking about the spring and summer. That is worrying, because it's going to be longer, and but whether we can get the virus sufficiently down so that we can have a physical meeting, we hope so, next year. It is wonderful to spend time with people, because however well you can do it virtually, to actually hang in there with someone you just met for the first time, or you haven't seen for a long time, and actually discover something, because everybody knows something more than you do, and so you become wiser every time you talk to an astrologer. So that we hope will happen. Looking more into the future, what we want is to get this knowledge of astrology and this sharing of knowledge of astrology extended ever more widely. So we want the website to be available and to be accessed by more and more people. And my dream has always been, and it's never yet been possible, that in the end, in spite of all the virtual stuff that we've focused on over the last 20 years, that it should be possible for there to be a home for astrology. There's a home for science. There's a home for just about every great knowledge system. But there isn't a home for astrology, a physical place where, I think all the enthusiasts for astrology, the servants of the association and other astrological organisations have got bits and pieces in their garage. They just want to put in the astrology home when it exists.
Yes.
I've got a complete record, pretty well, a full record of a lot of the technical stuff from the first computer onwards, and things like that in my garage, which is stuffed away, And so it would be wonderful if someone would come up with a major contribution or donation. We are a charity, so it could be gift aided. That would lead to us being able to have a premises for astrology, a proper premises for astrology. It's a very long vision, but I think if astrology is going to be generally accepted, then there has to be a proper physical presence for astrology. And if that's going to happen, then the association is one of the key organisations to facilitate it, and we need support to do it. So that would be my ultimate vision for the future. You're going. I'll just say one thing. I've got this. Remember this statue? You've been to conference, haven't you, Mary?
I have. Yes.
Yeah. Every year, I light this metal statue that is like a butter lamp with all these kind of metal angles around it to represent the planets. It was donated to us by a Serbian artist, given to us by a Serbian astrologer in 1997. I want to see that in the front of the new astrology building. So let's see if it happens.
Yeah, well, and if that were to happen, if and when, so when that happens, so there's an astrological address. So, when you say a home, you mean a hub, yeah. And
you think about what's the scientific Royal Society for Science, for example, in Pall Mall.
Yeah.
Now that should be also a building like that in central London. That is ridiculous because it's billions of pounds. But the point is, astrology is as important as I think as a lot of the other academic disciplines that are around, and we need a building to house its resources and offer its teachings and everything else,
Because quite a lot. I was talking the other week about Mary, was her name Margaret Hone, and I think she started an organisation. The name's just escaped me.
Faculty of Astrological Studies.
Thank you. But they used to practice round at her house to start with, and she lived in London. You know, so people have used their homes for that. But this would be, you'd like an astrological home.
A building that is for astrologers. There may be several astrologers living there. We did have a building in Caledonian Road in the late 1980s. It didn't work out financially that well. The Urania Trust owned it. The Urania Trust decided instead to sell the building and spend their resources supporting all sorts of fine astrological projects. But it wasn't, in any case, as a sufficient building. It was a compromise because that was the limited amount of funds we had. You need something much more substantial than that if it's going to be viable. You need to have their library, which we've got. The library needs to be there to start with. We need to have a room for technology. We need to have a number of lecture rooms and offices, and the whole business that's around a major academic discipline, the resources available and everything. This would need to be discussed, but you need to have a proper professional building for that.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll put the message out there. We'll start a GoFundMe page and we'll start taking donations.
Keep talking about it, but we need someone with a lot of money to come forward. Well, people do that. There's enough money to build this wing of the Natural History Museum, the Darwin. Darwin wing, is it? The wing that's all about sort of the origin of the species and the development of evolution and things like that. I mean, there are resources for major important projects that are going to benefit society. I just have this very idealistic view. Maybe I'm decades ahead, but that astrology is going to play a vital role in the future. And if it's going to do that, it needs to have the resources and the respectability that goes with it.
Thank you. That's a wonderful point. Thank you very much for speaking to us today, Roy. Yeah, and we'll put some links in the show notes to how to get to the Astrological Association website. Can I put your website address on there as well with the 75 software?
Yeah, it is Crucial Astro Tools, all one word, .co.uk. Crucial. If you just type Crucial Astro, usually that comes up top of the search engine.
Oh, actually, if you search for Roy Gillett, it comes up. So
yeah. Well, there we go. Yeah.
But I'll put the link there. So what I'm going to do is say goodbye to you, but we'll carry on talking afterwards. But if I just sort of close the session today, so thank you very much, Roy.
Well, thanks for giving me this opportunity, and may everyone who listens to it do more and more astrology and realise that it works really well for them and gives them a better life if they use it wisely. Just one thing I'd like to say, Mary, actually.
Yes.
That astrology is only a tool. It's telling you what's going on and giving you insight. But there's another element to having a good life, and that is having a good attitude. You could use astrology to manipulate and cause trouble to other people. If you do it, it'll bring horror to your life. So don't even think about doing it. But as long as you've got the right objective attitude, as long as you are detached from greed, ignorance and hatred in your heart, and you use astrology, then you should have a happy life.
Absolutely. Oh, that's wonderful words. Thank you, Roy. Thank you.